In London, this is The Economist. I'm Daniel Franklin, Executive Editor at The Economist.
And I'm Tom Standage, the Digital Editor.
Usually, Tom and I discuss a selection of stories that will be in the news in the week ahead. But today, in the first half of a two-part series, we're going to be looking at stories that will be in the news in the year ahead, starting with international issues.
In the year ahead, Germany holds a parliamentary election, the economic crisis rumbles on, the United Nations releases its latest report on the science of climate change, and we'll be asking where's the best place to be born in 2013?
Well, Tom, let's start with one of the most important elections in the year ahead in Germany. Germany, a critical country for the future of the Eurozone crisis. Angela Merkel's going to be somewhat tied up at home, isn't she?
Yes, that's what's rather worrying about this. This is an election that perhaps under normal circumstances the rest of the world wouldn't be paying too much attention to, but because of Germany's pivotal role in the Eurozone and holding it together, what happens in Germany's domestic politics will actually have far wider reverberations. So rather unusually, Germany will find that everyone is watching what's going on in its election campaign. America is used to this, that its election becomes a global news story, but this is less familiar ground for Germany.
So how's it looking for Angela Merkel and her opponents?
Well, at the moment she's in this coalition, her party, the CDU, and its sister party, the CSU, with the Free Democrats. But the Free Democrats are much less popular than they used to be. So the question to watch really is, assuming that she comes out ahead in the formation of a new coalition at the end of the campaign, which is still the most likely outcome, who will she end up with? And I think the things to watch out for during the campaign will be whether any of the parties, none of which are openly Eurosceptic at the moment, but there have been some grumblings, and the question really is whether any of the parties sort of make a clear break and say, no, we're actually opposed to all of this bailing out that we Germans are having to do. They're also worried about the loss of sovereignty to the European Central Bank, so it'll be interesting to see if a party makes that break and attracts much support. Another thing to watch out for will be how the Greens do, and also how the Pirate Party does. The Greens came to prominence several decades ago, and Germany was one of the countries where Green parties first did well. And in many ways, the story of the Pirate Party looks like a sort of replay of that film. They're a single-issue party, in theory. They're interested in internet rights and that sort of thing. But in fact, they've had to broaden their policies, much as the Greens had to as well. And so it was very interesting to see if they end up clearing the 5% threshold that's necessary to win some of the proportional representation votes in the Bundestag, and whether they form part of an eventual coalition.
The election is going to be held in September, but between now and then there's going to be a change in the way that the system works.
Yes, if you thought the American system was complicated, the German system is in some ways even more bizarre. So when you go and vote, you vote both for a candidate and for a party, and the candidates are then that are directly elected are then topped up with votes that are for the parties, which are proportional representation votes. The problem is that people sometimes vote for a candidate and they vote for a different party, and so you can end up with parties that have more members in Parliament than they actually got as a proportion of the vote, and that's unfair. They're called overhang seats, and so the Constitutional Court has decreed that this can't be allowed to stay in place, and that during the next few months before the election this has to be changed, and that will actually hurt Angela Merkel's party, the CDU, and its sister party, the CSU, the most. So again, that's something that will introduce uncertainty into this election, just when Germany, Europe, and indeed the world doesn't need it. So let's look at that question more broadly of the world economy. Clearly the euro crisis is going to continue to rumble on. We've got slow growth in much of the developed world. What's the picture, stepping back and looking at the Earth from the moon? Which regions are going to be doing better and which are going to be doing worse, do you think?
Well, very broadly the picture is similar to the one that we've seen in recent years, with the emerging world growing much faster than the rich world. The emerging world may grow by around 6% in 2013, the rich world only by 1.6%, something of that order. So nearly 4 times the growth in the emerging world than in the rich world, and Europe is a big part of that problem for the rich world. The Eurozone is essentially going to be flat. It starts the year with much of that region in recession. Even the German economy that we were just talking about is really struggling. Greece is going into its 6th year of recession, so a very poor picture in Europe. In the United States, perhaps there's an opportunity for it to perform a little bit better than most people have been expecting, but it still won't be very rapid growth by the standards that Americans themselves would like to see. So it's again the emerging world that one has to look for a more dynamic picture, particularly again China, which will probably be growing by 8% plus or so.
And where else in the developing world should we be looking for hotspots of growth?
Well, the really fast-growing economies are going to be smaller markets. China will be the fastest growing of the really big economies. India is still struggling. Brazil will come back a bit, but has disappointed this year and can only expect perhaps 3 to 4% growth in 2013. If you really want stellar growth, you have to look to exotic places like Macau or Libya, or the fastest growing economy in the world in 2013, we would predict, is going to be Mongolia, a country of only 3 million people, but a very big territory, and one that has huge new mines coming on stream, copper and gold mines, and because the economy is relatively small and these mines are absolutely enormous, that has a very big impact on growth. So expect growth of about 18% plus in Mongolia. Well, Tom, another global issue that's always with us is climate change, and in the year ahead there'll be the latest instalment of the science assessment from the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. What's it likely to say?
Well, this is a report that's produced every 6 years, so the last two came out in 2001 and 2007, and they're always terribly controversial. Last time around there was this erroneous claim that the glaciers of the Himalayas would all be gone by 2035, and it turned out this had been taken from a green lobby group's leaflet, and they in turn had copied it out of a very old magazine article. So that absolutely shredded the credibility of the IPCC, even though it does do very good scientific work. So what they'll be looking at this time around is they'll be giving their assessment of the state of the science of climate change and exactly what impact that's likely to have in the decades and the centuries to come. And the difficulty with this is that as the computer models become more accurate, you'd expect them to be less uncertain and to sort of come to some consensus about what's going to happen. In fact, that's not what happens. As you make the models cleverer, you put in more cloud processes, you try and work out the effect of vegetation and seasonal changes in vegetation. All you actually do is uncover new sources of uncertainty, which is very interesting from a scientific point of view, but terrible from the point of view of policymakers who want firm answers. And unfortunately, the science becomes sort of more intricate and more uncertain. So the hope is that that the new science, even though we won't be able to pin down exactly what's going to be happening with any more accuracy, will be looking more deeply into these processes.
So apart from allowing for the greater complexity of science, what else should we look out for as perhaps new in this latest report?
Well, I think there are two particular things to look for in this version of the report. One is sea level change. The last report was criticised because the contribution to sea level change that it considered was only the contribution that comes from the warming that makes the sea expand, just the thermal expansion of the oceans, and the melting of the ice caps wasn't considered. And that's a massive factor that really does have to be taken into account. So we should see a bit more detail on that. The other thing that the IPCC will be looking at, which they've steered clear from in previous years, is the question of geoengineering. And this is deliberate modification of the climate, but in the opposite direction to that caused by massive amounts of CO2. And this is something that has been rather taboo, and it's a sign, I think, of how the debate has changed in the past 6 years since the past report appeared, that they're prepared to look at this and say, well, just how plausible are some of these schemes for sort of pumping stuff into the atmosphere to block out sunlight, or flying giant mirrors in front of the sun, and various other things. So it'd be very interesting to see where they come down on that, but the very fact that that's included in the report itself is a sign that the debate is shifting. Okay, Daniel, now one of the many hats you wear is you're the editor of our World in annual, and in this year's edition, the World in 2013, there's a very interesting survey on where it might be the best place to be born this year. So where is the best place to be a newborn in 2013, and how do you decide?
So this is something that we first did about a quarter of a century ago, when we asked our colleagues at the Economist Intelligence Unit, a sister company of the Economist, to say which would be the best country to be born in the following year. And at that time, it was a very light-hearted exercise. They looked, yes, at GDP, but also at some such crucial indicators as subscriptions per head of The Economist as an indication of where might be a nice place. And bonus points were awarded for example, the quality of chocolate, and points were taken off for countries that were irredeemably boring. And at that point, the United States came top. This time, we again turned to the Economist Intelligence Unit, who now have very sophisticated models for quality of life index. And they put this through their models with a forward-looking element, looking at, for example, GDP per head in 2030, when a child born in 2013 would be entering into adulthood, as well as a number of other factors that people say contribute to quality of life, things like the crime rates, community, a sense of community, trust in institutions, and so on. So you put all those numbers into their model, out comes a list of 80 countries ranked in order of where the best place to be born would be.
And the winner is?
And the winner is Switzerland. So this time, it doesn't matter if some would say Switzerland was a tad boring, but also very stable, very prosperous, a very close-knit society. So Switzerland #1, Australia #2. Some people would be surprised to see the United States back in 16th place, and alas, bottom of the list comes Nigeria, the 80th country on the list. So this is giving food for thought, debate and argument, no doubt, in all these countries.
And they definitely took the chocolate weighting out, because it's a bit suspicious that Switzerland's done so well.
Yeah, there was no accounting for chocolate. So if you added in the chocolate weighting, I'm sure Switzerland would be mountains ahead of the rest.
Well, that's all for this programme. Join us again next week for another look at the events in the year ahead. In London, this is The Economist.